initial elliptical orbit will be circularized by the satellite's own propulsion means after separation from the launcher, and the final position of Intelsat 707 will be on the Atlantic Ocean. All systems are go as we approach the minus 28 minutes mark, and we will be describing the status panel in a few moments. The launch window is imposed by some of the spacecraft's early orbital maneuvers, mainly the calibration of its attitude control system. The launcher is composed of a first stage using classical storable propellants and a combination of 2 liquid and 2 solid strap-on boosters is chosen to match the launch vehicle performance with the spacecraft mass and the type of mission. The second stage and the third stage are mated. The second uses also conventional liquid propellants, where the third uses cryogenic liquid oxygen and hydrogen. Then comes the vehicle equipment bay, the launcher's brain, and finally the fairing, which encloses the Intelsat spacecraft. We will see some shootings recorded during the launcher assembly later on. The new mission control is one of the major changes and the new facilities we will be talking about throughout the broadcast. But first, let us describe our new status panel. This is the mission director of Ariane, Didier Cassé, and the range operations manager, Yves Raymond, who have been working hand in hand during these past weeks of the launch campaign. The status panel summarizes each of the systems participating in the countdown and that is being constantly monitored. The launch complex for fueling of the space vehicle. The launcher itself has to be ready for liftoff. The spacecraft is now being monitored by the Loral team and is in flight configuration. Weather forecast is mandatory to authorize beginning of some of the critical operations using weather radar and lightning measurements. The launch range, as we call a long list of services and supports, including electrical power and air conditioning distribution, ground and flight safety to ensure protection of populations and facilities. The tracking and telemetry stations downrange, totaling 4 stations for this flight of tonight. They include permanent reception and transmission of telemetry, allowing for quick look analysis of the launcher behavior and post-flight analysis, accurate tracking of the launcher using several radar and trajectory plotting. All different sites are linked with a powerful telecommunication system, and the summary of all status is the launch authorization panel. Minus 25 minutes and counting. We would now like to present the Ariane company and also a new phase in the Ariane management, namely Mr. Francis Avanzi, who is the new Executive Vice President and Chief Operating Officer.
Formed in 1980 as the first industrial and commercial space transportation company in the world, Ariane Space operates the Ariane launch system developed by the French space agency CNES on behalf of the European Space Agency ESA. Ariane Space demonstrates European scientific and technical capabilities and has the backing of the space industry and banks of 13 countries. Ariane Space operates worldwide with its European headquarters at Évry, just outside Paris in France, a subsidiary in Washington, D.C. in the USA, a branch office in the Asia-Pacific zone located in Tokyo in Japan. and a launch complex in Kourou, French Guiana, with a unique geographical position close to the equator. Combined with the extremely accurate orbit injection of Ariane, this equatorial position extends the life of the satellites. Constantly adjusting to changes in international market demand, Ariane Space provides customers with a complete, personalized range of launch services based on extensive experience and a highly reliable vehicle which can place payloads of up to 4.8 metric tons with Ariane 4 and in the near future 7 tons with Ariane 5 directly into orbit. Ariane Space is engaged in a long-term production program with its European space industry partners. The manufacturing, which follows a tight quality policy, is permanently aimed at meeting customer requirements worldwide. "12,000 highly qualified Europeans are engaged in this manufacturing activity. The success of this venture is largely due to the power and cohesion of the industrial partners involved. The principal contractors are Aerospatiale, SEP, DASA, the Fiat Group, Matra Marconi Space, CASA, Oerlikon Contraves. The various launcher sub-assemblies are built in Europe and taken by sea, air and land to the Kourou spaceport.
Here is Francis Avanzi, the new Executive Vice President of Ariane Space. And we would now like to move to the new chapter describing the Intelsat organization with a small clip coming up.
When there is something you have to say. When there is something you want to see. When there is something you need to know. One company brings it to you at the speed of light. Welcome to the world of Intelsat. Where more than 22 satellites, 22,000 miles above the Earth, bring every nation of the world together through a continuous stream of telephone, television, and business services. Why do we use satellites for such down-to-earth communications? To answer that question, just take a look at the new generation of spacecraft we're putting into orbit. The 15 satellites in the Intelsat 7 and 8 series are taking the world of satellite communications to new heights. They are capable of delivering information faster, cheaper, and more reliably than any other communication network on Earth. As the world becomes a global village, the instantaneous exchange of information across oceans, time zones, and continents requires the communication networks being both powerful and versatile.
The Intelsat 7s and the Intelsat 8s will provide additional flexibility and coverage.
These two series of spacecraft dramatically increase telephone circuits, TV transmission capacity, and transponder power, with expanded range, coverage, and state-of-the-art services. And only Intelsat has the 30 years of experience it takes to develop, operate, and maintain this high-flying, high-tech fleet. These generations of satellites aren't just designed to meet the communication needs of today, but with almost double the lifespan of the spacecraft that went before them, they'll be bringing the world closer together well into the next century. And because they have to live so long, so far away from home, they're built as if the world depended on them. And it does. While you're watching right now, 1 million phones are ringing. Over 7 million transactions are verifying. Over 100 million people are viewing. And over $30 billion is changing hands. And it's all happening over the most reliable global communication network ever conceived. Intelsat. This very human highway of information and ideas began in 1964 with a visionary concept which led to the creation of Intelsat. In 1969, Intelsat brought the world its first truly international broadcast, spanning 5 continents and reaching 500 million viewers, with the most unforgettable event of the 20th century.
It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
And the world watched it all, live. Intelsat is the world leader in providing its more than 130 member nations and scores of international corporate partners with the know-how to keep information flowing, business booming, and people communicating anytime, anywhere on the planet. Today, Intelsat continues to deliver the live, history-making television broadcasts that enrich, enlighten, and entertain billions of people throughout the world. And looking toward the future, one company has the vision.
The Intelsat 7 and 8 satellites provide higher power and better coverage.
The staying power, the resources, and the relationships to keep the people and the planet connected.
Intelsat is global communication.
Intelsat brings people together.
Intelsat, where the science of communication has a human touch.
And we have passed the minus 18-minute mark. Here are the 3 key people from right to left, Terry Edwards and Dave Griffiths from Intelsat, and Nick Yen from L'Oreal. This is the 12th Intelsat launch by Ariane, out of 17 launch services contracted so far. A few days ago, the technical committee of the Intelsat Board of Governors visited Kourou and was briefed on the Ariane 5 new generation and its advanced launch campaign these days. We will come back to Ariane 5 in a few moments. But now, again, the Intelsat people here in mission control are monitoring their spacecraft, which is in flight configuration, sitting on top of the launch vehicle. We recently talked to Terry Edwards, the satellite mission director at Intelsat, who explained to us how his spacecraft has been prepared for launch during the past weeks here at Kourou.
The Intelsat 707 spacecraft arrived in French Guiana on the 22nd of January aboard an Antonov 124 cargo aircraft. The spacecraft inside its shipping container was then transported to CSG, where functional testing of the spacecraft began. One of the tests that is done is a matchmate test to ensure compatibility between the spacecraft and the Ariane supplied adapter. In addition, the alignments of the various sensors and thrusters on the spacecraft are checked. Following the completion of functional testing in S1B, the spacecraft is loaded into the CCU-2 and then transported to S3B for propellant loading operations. This transfer was accomplished on the 9th of February. Here you see the L'Oreal propellant loading operations underway. On the 28th of February, the spacecraft inside the fairing was moved to the launch pad, and the following day, the 29th of February, the fairing and spacecraft were mated with the launch vehicle. The outside of the fairing with the Intelsat logo, the spacecraft is all set to be launched.
All these operations are carried out primarily by L'Oreal and Intelsat with the help of the Ariane teams. And in parallel to these operations, of course, the launch vehicle is being prepared. These are some of the flight authority representatives here in mission control who have been monitoring also the preparation of the launch vehicle in the past weeks. The different stages are shipped over from Europe to French Guiana, and upon arrival to the Space Center are integrated in vertical position in the preparation building of Launch Complex number 2. The transport container is used also as hoisting device, and the first stage is put into vertical position. The second stage is then mated In this preparation area, mechanical and electrical checkout operations are carried out. Then follows assembly of the two liquid strap-on boosters for this particular launch configuration. And the third stage is mated on top of the second. The third stage is the one that uses cryogenic propellants. Once functional checks have been completed, the launcher is rolled out to the launch pad and is almost ready to receive its payload. In recent times we had major changes here at CSG, and we have interviewed the director of the Guyana Space Center, Michel Mignot.
Welcome to the Guyana Space Center, Europe's spaceport. As from this year, 1996, the year of Ariane 5, this is our space-based showcase. Here we are at the new entrance, clearly showing our determination to be ready for Ariane 5 and to be the spaceport of the future, the base of the 21st century, ready to serve all international space needs. Here you see a superb full-scale mock-up of the Ariane 5 launcher, the new European rocket with which we'll be launching for the next quarter of a century. This is the Space Museum, which rather than concentrating on past achievements is a showcase of European space know-how that will open the way to the future. In 1995, 45,000 visitors were shown the CSG facilities or observed an actual launch. This year, with Ariane 5 and the museum, we can expect well over 50,000 visitors. Now, the famous Jupiter 2 Mission Control Center, from which we coordinate all the Guyana Space Center space activities. This is where you find at the top level technical and operational staff and the customers, but there's also plenty of a room to seat 250 guests who can share these exciting moments, and the media too, who can transmit their info live throughout the world. This new Mission Control Center is just the tip of the iceberg. In fact, a major program to upgrade the CSG equipment has been completed. Some of the technical and operational facilities dated back to our early days 30 years ago. This new CNES and European Space Agency facilities will enable us to meet the challenges of the future, starting with the imminent Ariane 5 launch.
We are approaching minus 11 minutes and counting. The operational teams here at Kourou are led by a few key engineers. We will let them introduce themselves and tell us what they do.
Each launch campaign corresponds to a particular mission. Alongside the permanent Arianespace and Space Center authorities, each mission is run by a specifically appointed team. This temporary operational team is made up of 4 people. The chef de mission, CM, Arianespace mission director, responsible for the mission. The COL, or launch site operations manager, responsible for the launch vehicle and the launch complex. The DDO, or CSG range operations manager, responsible for the range preparation. And lastly, the DMS, satellite mission director. The Ariane mission director is responsible for the smooth running of the campaign and works hand in hand with the DDO and the COL. He monitors the implementation of the contract signed by the customer and the Arianespace commercial service. He also declares the range, except for the launch complex, to be ready for launch. The mission director is informed as to the readiness of the launch complex and the launch vehicle by the COL. The satellite mission director keeps him up to date regarding the spacecraft, and the DDO reports on the range. The mission director checks the specifications of the satellite authority contract have been fully complied with. During countdown, the range operations are coordinated by the operations director for the mission director. And during the final phase, the mission director provides the range operations manager with the various COEL and satellite mission director reports. The range operations manager is responsible for coordinating two types of activity for a given launch campaign. The first activity revolves around the preparation operations of the satellite, and these are carried out in a special payload preparation building. The activities encompass the technical equipment of the payload preparation building, the ground safety operations, transport, telecom, and quality. The second activity is the operational preparation of the launch base facilities, including specific and general training exercises, such as the dress rehearsal 3 days prior to launch, position finding, trajectory plotting, telemetry, meteorology, telecommunications, and downrange tracking stations. During countdown, the DDO directs all launch base facilities so as to be ready for liftoff. The DDO and COEL work in close coordination throughout the countdown to ensure a smooth and successful launch. The COEL is responsible for the launch team. COEL stands for Launch Site Operations Manager. In fact, he manages one campaign, the duration of a normal campaign being 5 to 6 weeks. During this time, the various stages and subcomponents of the launch vehicle have to be assembled. Checks and verifications are carried out, for example, of the electrical systems, leak tightness, and other functions too. We also carry out all final preparation activities prior to launch and run the launch itself. During final countdown and the launch, the team works from here, the launch center. It's here that we have all the launch vehicle command and control equipment. This is the real nerve center of the launch vehicle, and it's to this center that the launch vehicle transmits all its information.
We are now at minus 6 minutes 50 seconds, and as you see, we have a rate status coming from the launch complex. We will be coming back to this, which is, as we have been informed, a small technical problem on the ground facilities and not on the launcher itself. These images were taken a few hours ago when the servicing gantry was withdrawn. The range
Tous de l'EDO, arrêt du décompte sur rouge en centre de lancement, que tous les moyens se tiennent prêts à reprendre la séquence synchronisée dès le retour au vert.
You have now recognized Yves Raymond, Range Operations Director, confirming that due to this rate status coming from the launch complex, we are holding at minus 6 minutes, and on the lower right edge of the screen we have the countdown stopped at minus 6. Some of the guests who have been invited to follow up the launch with us today, the Intelsat spacecraft managers, Dave Griffiths and Terry Edwards, are also monitoring closely the operations at countdown. Dave Griffiths on the left has been here in Kourou for almost 2.5 months now. We have some young space-interested people among our guests. We are still at the minus 6 mark. As soon as the countdown will resume, we will start the so-called synchronized. These are the last 6 minutes of the countdown. And they are called synchronized sequence because a high number of checks and commands will be carried out in a fully automatic manner by two computers running in parallel at the launch center, where Jean Rebeu, whom we have already introduced, and his team are monitoring the vehicle. Much like an aircraft crew sitting in the cockpit. The difference though, Ariane's cockpit is inside a blockhouse at 1,000 meters from the launch pad. This split image comes from two cameras, each filming one of the feeding arms at the connecting point with the third stage tank. Let us see how this image is built with a small animation. That's the upper part of the launcher. That's now zoomed. On the right hand is the hydrogen feeding arm, on the left hand the oxygen. These cryogenic fluids are handled at very low temperatures, below minus 200 degrees Celsius. Because they evaporate very rapidly, a fine-tuned topping up has to be performed until close to flight. We have now Intelsat spacecraft on internal power. The third stage hydrogen tank is at flight pressure. On the left hand side is Nick Yen from L'Oréal. He is responsible for launch vehicle interface. And also in another control room we have John Marison from L'Oréal. Another view of the launch center. Our pilot, the COL. Our launch tower director, the DDO in our jargon. He's getting ready to announce the -1 minute mark. We have oxygen tank at flight pressure now. Tension is building up slightly. I would like to give you a quick preview of the launch events after liftoff and vertical ascent. We will have jettison of strap-on boosters, separation of first stage, ignition of the second.
À tous de DDO, attention pour H0 moins 1 minute.
-1 minute and counting. We will then have jettison of the nose fairing, separation.
Moins 1 minute.
Separation of the second stage, ignition of the third, acquisition by the different downrange stations, and after about 20 minutes of flight, we expect to have injection of Intelsat 707 into geostationary transfer orbit. But now we would like to leave to you the final moments before liftoff, and we will come back to you later.
À tous de DDO, attention pour décompte final. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, top. Moteur, décollage. hauteur nominale. Tous les paramètres sont en trajectoire normale.
And we had ignition and liftoff
Extinction des propulseurs de
of
point à
this
poudre.
Ariane Space Flight 84 carrying the Intelsat 707 spacecraft. Several optical and infrared cameras are now tracking the launcher. And this is the plotting curve showing us the altitude, already 5,000 meters. The right hand side of the image, some
Pression foyer, vitesse turbine normale.
technical information. Only
Pilotage trajectoire normale.
now we hear the rumble
Séparation des deux propulseurs de point à poudre.
here at Mission Control. Jettison of the two solid boosters, which will impact on the coastal strip security zone after about 2 minutes of fall down time.
Tous les paramètres sont nominaux.
All parameters normal, as the operations director confirms. If we run down the technical parameter on the right hand side, we have elapsed time in seconds. We have moyen, meaning
Toutes les pressions et vitesses turbines sont normales, le pilotage est normal, trajectoire normale.
the radar being used right now is Bretagne 1 near Kourou. S is the angle under which this radar is seeing the launcher now above the horizon, 62 degrees and rising. A is the altitude in kilometers, also increasing very rapidly. And in the bottom is velocity in kilometers per second. Terry Edwards is monitoring
Extinction des deux propulseurs d'appoint liquide.
very closely. We now have jettison of the two
Largage des deux propulseurs d'appoint liquide.
liquid boosters, which will splash down and sink in the Atlantic Ocean at more than 200 kilometers off.
Tous les paramètres sont nominaux, la trajectoire est normale.
200 kilometers off the coast after about 4 minutes of fall down time. We have now passed the Mach 4 velocity, 1.9 kilometers per second, and burning about 1 ton of propellant per
Trajectoire et
second.
pilotage normaux.
All parameters and guidance are normal. You can see how precisely the launcher is following the predetermined track on the trajectory plotting. Dave Crivets from Intelsat, spacecraft preparation
Extinction
manager,
premier étage.
is also following.
Séparation premier, deuxième étage, allumage deuxième étage, pression normale.
We had the separation of first stage and ignition of the
Vitesse turbine
second.
et pression normale du moteur deuxième étage.
Everything is normal. The first stage now has a fall down time of about 8 minutes and will splash down at more than 800
Tous les paramètres sont nominaux.
kilometers off the coast. We have now passed Mach 9 velocity. That's about 12,000 kilometers per hour. We now have less than 60 tons flying out of the more than 400 tons we had at liftoff.
Tous les paramètres sont normaux, la trajectoire est normale.
Everything is normal. Altitude already almost 120 kilometers after only 5 minutes of flight.
Séparation coiffe.
We have jettison of the nose fairing. The two half shells will splash down and sink 1,500 kilometers east of the pad.
Pression foyer, vitesse turbine normale, le pilotage est normal.
After about 11 minutes of fall down. We now have Mach 11 velocity.
Le pilotage est normal, la trajectoire est toujours correcte.
Guidance and trajectory are correct.
Fin de propulsion du deuxième étage. Séparation deuxième, troisième étage. L'allumage du troisième étage, la pression est normale.
We now had separation of second stage and ignition of the third stage. The second stage will culminate.
Tous les paramètres
now.
sont nominaux. La trajectoire est normale.
The second stage will culminate at 200 kilometers altitude and then fall down during about 12 minutes until it splashes down more than 2,000 kilometers east of French Guiana on the Atlantic. Less than 20 tons are now flying. During each launch, the flight safety officer,
Acquisition par la station de Natal.
first tracking station, has acquired. The flight safety officer and his team have the mission of protecting the launcher from external commands and, most importantly,
Tous les paramètres sont normaux.
of protecting populated areas from any launcher misbehavior. The flight safety work starts well before the launch with a thorough analysis of the trajectory, the so-called safety submission phase. This is followed by rigorous trainings and simulations so that no possible scenario is left to improvisation. The flight safety officer has the full decision independence to destroy the launcher before it becomes hazardous to populated areas. For this, he follows criteria that have been
Tous les paramètres sont normaux, la trajectoire est normale.
predefined and accepted by all authorities beforehand. Everything is normal. The same principle of having safety experts involved already in the design phase of hardware applies also to any hazardous operation performed on the ground, both on satellites and on the launcher, like propellant loading, transportations, integration of pyrotechnic equipment, and so on. As many as 40 safety engineers work full-time at the Guyana Space Center on preliminary studies, analysis of procedures, operations monitoring, and advising to the different industrial site managers. We're now approaching 8.5 minutes elapsed time. The Ariane telemetry system allows for an uninterrupted
Tous les paramètres sont nominaux.
quick look analysis of
Il reste environ
about
10 minutes à pousser.
10 more minutes to the end of the propulsion. We have a quick look analysis of
Pression, foyer, vitesse, turbine sont normales, le pilotage est normal.
about 50 parameters are being monitored in real time during the flight on the launcher behavior. Plus, up to 800 more parameters are recorded for a complete analysis after the flight.
Fin de poursuite par les moyens de Kourou.
Kourou has lost visibility. This is normal. The launcher is now beyond the horizon. It is only after the flight evaluation that the following flight is authorized. And if any even small anomaly is detected, it has to be understood and corrected before future flights are authorized. Our Intelsat friends, together with the L'Oral people, have been in Kourou for a few weeks now. We were quite lucky with the weather because we are in the middle of the rainy season.
Le pilotage et tous les paramètres sont normaux, la trajectoire est normale.
It was quite cloudy last evening, but we had no high winds, no lightning risk. The visibility was within limits. We were talking about confidence and mutual trust and transparency between the teams, and we can read this on the faces.
Tous les paramètres sont normaux.
This needs, of course, making the best efforts on each side, and Ariane has increased its launch capacity to 70 satellites to be launched between now and the year 2000. This includes the proven capacity of launching every 3 weeks when needed, and also the progressive use of Ariane 5, the new generation of European launchers, with increased performance and higher reliability, now approaching the end of development phase under the responsibility of the European Space Agency, the French Space Agency, and all the launcher industry throughout Europe. Preparation for the Ariane 5 maiden flight is well underway.
Il reste environ 7 minutes à pousser.
Here at
Tous les
CST,
paramètres sont normaux, la trajectoire est normale.
7 more minutes of propulsion. We were saying that the Ariane 5 first launch campaign is well underway. The launcher elements arrived here at the Guyana Space Center mid-February, and the 4 cluster spacecraft are being loaded with propellant these days. On the Intelsat side, the organization has shown once
Acquisition
more.
par la station d'ascension.
Intelsat has shown once more its confidence in the Ariane launch system by booking the launch of its 709 satellite already on the second Ariane 5 launch to fly later this year. We had acquisition by the Ascension Island.
Pression,
station.
foyer, vitesse, turbine nominale, le pilotage est normal, la trajectoire est normale.
Everything is normal. Trajectory, guidance. We're now using one of the inertial platforms as tracking source. But let us come back to today's 707 satellite, a
Tous les paramètres sont normaux.
communications bird built by Space Systems Loral of Palo Alto, California, with an expected lifetime of
Fin de poursuite par la station de Natal.
15 years. From its orbital position above the Atlantic, it will offer international telephone services up to more than 100,000 two-way telephone circuits, plus broadcasting domestic and regional telecom services. We are approaching.
Il reste 5 minutes à pousser.
5 more minutes to go for the third stage
Tous les paramètres sont normaux.
engine. Everything is normal. We are at an altitude of almost 190 kilometers above
Tous les paramètres sont normaux.
above the Atlantic Ocean. We are approaching the end of launcher mission, and then it will be the responsibility of the Intelsat teams to carry out the early orbit maneuvers. They will take 5 days to put the spacecraft from its initial elliptical transfer orbit into a circular geostationary one.
Pression, foyer, vitesse, turbine normale, le pilotage est calme.
5 more days will follow for the in-orbit tests of the spacecraft bus, plus 21 days for the payload tests. This brings the scheduled start of service of Intelsat 707 to a date as soon as mid-April. A special maneuver will take place after the third stage shutdown. It will involve an attitude change of the upper remaining part of the launcher. And
Pression foyer, vitesse turbine toujours normale, trajectoire normale.
this maneuver will ensure the injection of Intelsat into the right orbit with the correct attitude and spin rate. The third stage will then be put into a slightly different orbit to avoid any collision with the satellite. And it will be passivated. This means
Acquisition par la station de Libreville.
our last tracking station has acquired the signal from the launcher and is now receiving the telemetry
Tous les paramètres sont normaux, il reste environ 1 minute à pousser.
and transmitting it in real time to Kourou for quick look evaluation, plus recording on the station the remaining few hundred parameters.
Tous les paramètres sont normaux.
Let us come back to what happens to the third stage. It will be passivated, meaning its tanks will be completely emptied to avoid any explosion and the generation of unnecessary orbital debris. We are approaching now the satellisation velocity, 9.7 kilometers per second.
Fin de propulsion au 3e étage.
Third stage has now shut down.
Fin de poursuite normale de la station d'ascension.
And the Ascension Island station in the South Atlantic has normally lost the signal. Telemetry is now received by the Libreville station in Gabon, West Africa. At the end of its life, the Intelsat 707 will save enough fuel for a so-called deorbit, thus freeing the precious geostationary position for a new bird. But we are not at the end of the life. We are approaching the birth of Intelsat.
Orientation du composite en cours. Fin de la manœuvre d'orientation.
The final sequence, first reorientation of the third stage with the spacecraft still attached to it. Approaching separation of Intelsat 707.
Séparation Intelsat 707.
And we have Intelsat separation. A new baby is born, much to the satisfaction of Intelsat and of all of us. You can read this on the faces. Acquisition of the satellite by the first station in Perth, Australia, is expected in a few minutes. The complete network of 6 Intelsat ground stations is participating in the mission. They are located in Australia, China, Italy, Germany, and in the US states of Maryland and Hawaii. acquisition of the sun by the onboard sensors in about 1 hour. Deployment of solar arrays in about 2.5 hours. And for the Intelsat orbit circularization, 3 apogee motor firings are foreseen. The first of which in about 26 hours. I would like to show you how these teams have worked hand in hand, because they're supposed to shake hands now, and cigars. I'm not sure smoking is allowed in mission control, but at least the handing out of cigars seems to be allowed. That's what the Yves Raymond is doing right now. There we have the handshake. Unfortunately, our commentators' cabins are a little bit far away from the operational part of the building, and I am afraid we will have no cigars up here. Before the final declarations by Mr. Avanzi of Ariane and Mr. Edwards of Intelsat, we are waiting for spacecraft news on the acquisition by the first ground station in Australia. We would like to ask you for a few moments of patience, and we are trying to show you some more beautiful replay images of this impressive takeoff that happened only 20 minutes ago.
À tous de DDO, attention pour décompte final. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, top. Phase des 6 moteurs, décollage. Pression moteur nominale. Tous les paramètres sont en trajectoire normale.
And we had ignition and liftoff
Extraction des propulseurs de frein à couvre.
Ariane Space Flight 84 carrying the Intelsat 7. Dave Griffiths is still waiting, as is Nick Yen, for confirmation of the first cries of the baby, the first signals sent to the ground station. Another replay should be
à tous de
coming up.
DDO. Fin de chronologie V084. Les moyens sont remis à la disposition des adjoints. Débriefage du lancement en salle Max Hauser aujourd'hui à 15h30.
We are still in mission control. People have not left. And Mr. Avanzi, the new Chief Operating Officer and Executive Vice President of Arianespace, is not on the screen, but I can see through the window he is getting ready. Mr. Avanzi comes from the aeronautical field. He has been for the past 3 years chairman and president of CFM International, one of the worldwide leading companies in aircraft engines. He has joined the Arianespace company in November of last year. He should be soon on our screens.
Good idea.
We have Dave Griffiths, very attentive to the phone, waiting for the good news. The teams here are tired, but happy. And here he is, Francis Avanzi.
Mesdames et messieurs, comme vous l'avez constaté,
Ladies and gentlemen, as you could witness, Arianespace has satisfied the objectives of Flight 84.
Le satellite
The
Intelsat
707 Intelsat spacecraft is now on its geostationary transfer orbit, ready for the next step, which will be managed by our Intelsat friends towards an orbital final position on the Atlantic Ocean. Flight has been both calm and precise. Our Ariane 4 has completed satisfied our expectations once more. This is the third launch this year, and the fourth satellite put in orbit by Arianespace out of a total of 106 launches. This is the 14th flight in 12 months. It's a record for us. We have still 9 more flights and 14 satellites to launch before the end of '96. We are happy to confirm that everything is guaranteed to our clients, both on Ariane 4 and our new baby Ariane 5. The European Space Agency, CNES, are actively working.
And my thought now is obviously going to our customer Intelsat, whose whole team, I'm sure, has been very focused on this event. That you were waiting for a long time with impatience, but I think with also serenity. This event represents the 24th satellite on orbit for Intelsat fleet, 12 of which have been entrusted to Arianespace, confirming the faith and trust of Intelsat organization toward Arianespace over the past 16 years. And I want to mention here that the first order of Intelsat organization for an Ariane launch has been done in '78, which means 1 year ahead of the first flight of Ariane 1, which means a lot for all of us. And on behalf of Arianespace team and the whole members of the Ariane community here on site, but also in Europe, in Washington, in Tokyo, I want to thank you. To thank you for your confidence and to warmly congratulate you and wish you the best in your operations. I also want to take the opportunity to thank our friends from SS Loral, along with us and Intelsat, for the outstanding team work with Arianespace and the CSG in the preparation of this campaign. And I really think that this team integration is without contest one of the secrets of the quality of our operations, one of the keys of our long-term commitment to our customers, which makes the difference on the marketplace. Now I would like to introduce to you Terry Edwards, who is the director for Intelsat in charge of Launch Vehicle Program Office. and I'm sure that he will share with you his first impressions of the flight. Terry, thank you.
Thank you. And thanks to all of you who have had the courage to come out at this hour and watch the successful launch. I have no choice. This is my job, but you have a choice, and it was nice of you to be here. On behalf of Intelsat, I would like to thank everyone involved for an extremely successful launch. Sometimes successful launches go virtually unnoticed to the world at large, and successes are considered to be routine. However, those of us who do this for a living know that successes are the results of lots of hard work by experienced and professional people. So a thanks to a few of those professional and experienced people. First, thanks to L'Oreal. L'Oreal, who builds very good quality satellites. Thanks to Ariane and all of its partners for building the best launch vehicle in the world. Thanks to CSG for providing the best and safest commercial launch complex in the world. Thanks to all members of the campaign team who worked hard here since the spacecraft arrived in January and who are responsible for our daily successes. And a very special thank you to Freelance Service, who helps us enjoy what little free time we have while we are here. And now a brief message to the Intelsat and L'Oreal team in Washington. We've done our part and the rest is up to you. Best of luck as you continue your activities to place the spacecraft that we just successfully launched here to geostationary orbit and have it ready for service in mid-April. I'll see you in Washington when I return. Thank you all.
Thank you, Terry. Long life to Intelsat 707 et prochain rendez-vous pour vous et nos invités, donc pour le vol 85, mi-avril, à partir du 19 avril, avec EMSAT, cette fois canadien, à bord de Ariane 4 à nouveau.
19 of April with the EMSAT spacecraft from Canada. I'm afraid and we had ignition and liftoff. I am afraid we now have to say goodbye to everyone in French Guiana, in Europe, in Washington DC, in Palo Alto, in Tokyo. Please join us again during the second half of April for Ariane Flight 85. Our special thanks go to Paul Chatko, who contributed to this commentary but could not be with us today.